Hey Fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis and you're watching Fight News Now Extra. Stay tuned because we have a fight announcement, a retirement, and more news to bring you on our Newsmakers. And then we'll hear from John Pollock, John Ramdine, and Robin Black. So here we go. Another fight has been set for UFC 157. We'll see the return of Robbie Lawler, who hasn't fought for the UFC since card 50, and will drop back down to 170 to face a tough opponent in Josh Koscheck. UFC 157 takes place in Anaheim, California on February 23rd. UFC lightweight Jeremy Stephens is also planning on dropping down a division. Stephens' manager said he'll do a test cut down to 145 in January and is looking to book a fight for March. The drop down to featherweight was considered after Stephens was knocked out by Yves Edwards at UFC on Fox 5 for his third loss in a row. Fedor's younger brother Aleksander Emelianenko has announced his retirement on Facebook. The 31-year-old blamed injuries and health problems as the reason for stepping away from competition. Emelianenko fought in M1, Pride, and is a three-time world Sambo champion. And it turns out Golden Boy Oscar De La Hoya is a fan of Rory McDonald and was impressed after watching him fight BJ Penn. He also had some advice for the rising welterweight.
He looks like he has talent. He looks like he has that little it factor. He has to just keep on working on it. Keep on working on it. You have to feel that killer instinct. Feel it. And go after it. You have to feel it, grab it, get it. He's a talented fighter. I mean, my hat goes off to him.
That's the latest news from the world of combat sports. Let's hear from our MMA panel, John Pollock, John Ramdine, and Robin Black. And guys, pretty cool to see a boxer endorsing an MMA fighter.
I think this is a very smart tack that Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy has taken. We saw the night of the Fox card, Oscar tweeting the fact that go watch the Fox card and then come check out Marquez and Pacquiao. And I think that there's a lot of crossover when you have the right fights here to present to people. And there's a lot of evidence that there's this crossover that continues between both and not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it's very, very true. I have a number of friends who are boxing fans. They're not really MMA fans, but they tuned into the Fox card and they were blown away at the level of entertainment and the level of gamesmanship with these athletes. So I think we're going to see a lot of boxing fans maybe make that crossover.
And, you know, there's business to be done for sure. But on the other hand, Oscar De La Hoya likes fighting. You know, this is what the guy's growing up on. It's his passion. And he got excited by that fight.
And a fight that is exciting this man, I know, is Robbie Lawler returning to the UFC where he's going to take on Josh Koscheck. UFC 157 coming up on February the 23rd. And Lawler returning to 170.
Yeah, I think it's great that Robbie Lawler is back in the UFC. This guy is super explosive. He's very entertaining, and he knows if he wants to get to that next level, he has to kind of change things up. We saw his progression. He's actually seen a huge progression in mixed martial arts. This guy has been a part of the history dating back to the old days of the Pat Miletich team and, of course, working with Matt Hughes and Rich Franklin, and still relevant in 2012. And I think Robbie Lawler, he now has that relationship with the guys in Arizona, working his wrestling, and we know that that's the game for Robbie Lawler. He's got to make sure that his wrestling is on point and try to knock Josh Koscheck's head off. But I'm sure it's going to be entertaining because both guys are that. Koscheck good at talking smack. Robbie Lawler not so much so. He does his talking.
He barely talks.
He barely talks.
Oh my God, we could get a Robbie Lawler-Rory McDonald fight one day here at 170.
Yes, we could.
Oh, give me a 1 hour count.
Nobody's got a word to say on that one. But you know, how crazy is this? You end up, hey man, come back to the UFC. Here you go, Josh Koscheck. Like, that's the first fight. That's the level it's at these days. There's, you know, it's a cliche, but there's no easy fights. But man, Josh Koscheck in your first fight back, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's awful. And it would be interesting to know what Robbie Lawler's pay is going back to the UFC. We knew that Strikeforce was taking very good care of Robbie Lawler. I think he was getting paid $90,000 a fight.
I don't think he's getting 90 grand in the UFC.
I bet he is.
Yeah.
I bet they just took it and carried it over. He's been around long enough. Dana White's proven at the very least he takes care of the old dogs.
Let's chat about this funeral that is coming up January the 12th on Showtime. It's going to be a free preview weekend to watch Strikeforce be officially buried into the ground and presenting a show that on paper, at least trying to go out here with a bang.
Yeah, it's almost unnecessary because, you know, I don't know how many people are going to see some of these undercard fights, guys like George Gurgel on here, Ryan Couture. So it's a really loaded card. You have the main eventers, Safadine and Marquardt. Aren't they fighting for the title?
Yes, the Strikeforce welterweight title, which, wow, will that be the most anticlimactic title victory if Saffiedine were to win? And immediately
he wins the title
gone.
and just hands it back to Scott Coker, I guess.
No, you keep it and you put it on your mantle, and for the rest of your life you go, I won the Strikeforce title. I mean,
never defended it.
That's all right. It'll have some real value to him. One day his grandkids, he'll be looking at that thing and he'll say he fought a 17-foot tall man in a giant cage.
Well, I am still looking forward to this final Strikeforce event, and then it will be all absolved. We're hearing in the neighborhood of 40 fighters are going to be brought over to the UFC, give or take. I'm a little surprised that many are being brought in here. Like, this roster is packed right now.
Yeah, well, I'm actually not surprised. It depends on what the UFC does, and I imagine what they are going to do is they're going to trim some of the fat of their existing roster. We know the announcement of this current season of The Ultimate Fighter. They cut 12 of those 16 fighters.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with it too, but I think the UFC is sending a very strong message to competitors in mixed martial arts right now that we are here to take the best of the best. You better perform or you're going to get your walking papers.
And I think, Robin, that to me adds more value to Ultimate Fighter, knowing that there is one spot at the end of this, and maybe if you make it to the Final Four, you'll get an opportunity. But it's not like 3/4 of the house is going to walk into the UFC.
I agree. They were rewarding these guys for just being there by giving them a contract. That's nonsense.
All right. Well, someone we always like to reward is Sarah Davis, who would have a spot in any Ultimate Fighter house, I'm sure.
For sure.
Aw, you guys are the best.
We try.
All right, thanks, guys. So our friends at TELUS introduced us to this awesome Samsung Rugby LTE. It's a perfect phone for rough and tumble lifestyle because it's waterproof and it can be dropped and banged up and be perfectly fine. How cool is that? So get your hands on this by going to TELUS.com, and then don't forget to download Fight Network's app for Androids and iPhones to stay on top of all combat sports news. There's tons of stuff in here. All right, now stay tuned right here on Fight Network for an extended preview of UFC 155.